Welcome back. Today's video is going to be a little bit different, as over the last few months I've been trying to put together two different reviews for two different watches, and I've been having some technical difficulties putting them together. One of these is actually a watch that's been asked about a couple of times, and it's that Reef Tiger that was involved in that Miyota giveaway a couple months ago. And the other is a watch that Spinnaker gave me. It's a Hull Riviera. The issue with both is that they're just really reflective, so it's just a bit of a challenge to consistently get some good footage of them. And while I always prefer to do a detailed review, I'm kind of OCD that way, I think here it would just wind up being about 10 minutes of glare, and I don't think anyone really wants to watch that. Now the camera does exaggerate this just a little bit, but it is still an issue that translates over into the real world. So I think it kind of goes without saying that I don't really recommend either of these. But as people have been asking about at least one of these, I thought I should do something with them. So I thought I'd put them together in one video and just really kind of condense this down into what you need to know about each. So first off, we have the Reef Tiger, and I think it's a reference number RGA1616. And this is a watch I bought off AliExpress. It's a 41mm dress watch that's either taking a lot of inspiration from the Rolex Datejust or an Omega Constellation Globemaster. Or they really just decided to use a fluted bezel and throw in a 24-hour subdial for the heck of it. But regardless of the inspiration, it winds up being a rather unique and actually striking watch in this price range. And it's actually fairly well made with the exception of that aforementioned glare issue. And that glare issue is really just a combination of a really reflective dial combined with a domed crystal, and that crystal doesn't have any AR coating on it. So it's just a really bad combination, and it's actually kind of a pity because the rest of the watch is actually quite good. At some angles and some lighting conditions, I think you can really see the beauty that this watch has, but that glare is just really apparent the rest of the time, and it's actually quite distracting when you're out in the real world. The best part about the watch is clearly the case, and in fact I'm kind of tempted to hold on to this just to use as kind of a mod project. It has a nice brushed finish throughout except for a polished edge and that bezel. I think it just really helps it stand out and actually gives it a good look. Although for a dress watch I do think it's a bit large for what it is, and especially with a lug-to-lug of almost 50mm. Although while the watch is a little wide, it does have a pretty good thickness. And a lot of that is thanks to the case back, which is actually pretty flat and really well done. And all of that just translates into a total thickness of about 11.8, which is actually pretty good with a domed crystal at this price. The strap is okay, at least for the price, but it's nothing really special. It is genuine leather with a deployment clasp. But even with the limited amount of use I've given it, it's already starting to show a lot of wear. So I think the strap is something you'd want to swap early on. Now the movement they don't specify at all on AliExpress, and it does have this custom rotor with their own caliber number. But I'm pretty sure, but not 100%, that it's a Miyota 8200 series. As I've heard it mentioned before that they use Miyotas, and on the Amazon site they do list it as a Miyota 8217. But because of that custom rotor, I can't really be 100% certain, or even sure that they're not going to change it to a Chinese movement in the future. When you do happen to catch this at just the right angle, the sunburst finish and silver Dauphine hands just really look nice and just kind of pop against that backdrop. And I really do like the more exaggerated indicators at the 12, 3, 6, and 9. Not only do they match their counterparts in size, creating a bit of a nice symmetry, but they also create kind of a crosshair effect that just focuses your eyes on the center. However, most of the time the watch just really looks washed out, and just kind of like you see here. So bottom line is, I think if they drop the size just a little bit, and then either swapped out the dial to something much less reflective, or maybe gone to a flat crystal, or just put a ton, and I mean a ton of AR coating on the back of this one, then I think they might actually have something here. But as it is now, especially with that glare, I think it's just going to be an easy pass for most people. Although if you're still tempted, then just kind of keep an eye out for sales, And maybe look at the silver version. I think that one might not be quite as reflective as this one. So the second watch we're going to take a look at is a Spinnaker Hull Riviera, and this is a watch that Spinnaker sent to me to review. Now I believe there are currently 4 versions of the Hull watch out there. There was the original from last year, but over the summer they followed it up with a California edition, a chronograph, and now the Riviera. And as to why they cranked out so many in such a short period of time, I can't really tell you. But to make things even more confusing, there are actually 2 different versions of the Hull Riviera. There's one with a textured dial and the one that I got. But the main thing to know here is that all of the hulls, except for the chrono version, do share the same case. They just have different dials. And this dial is, it's a bit interesting. It is actually kind of the reason I wanted to see it. It seems to be part Nautilus, with its sunburst metallic horizontal grooves, and most of the indices probably go along with that as well. But there might be just a touch of Rolex Explorer there with those 9 and 3 indices on the dial. It's a bit different, and when you throw the whole thing into a Panerai-like case, then it really is just kind of a mashup, and I was curious to see if it would actually work. And it sort of does. Now this does share the same case, so it does share some of the same shortcomings as the other hulls, as it is a bit square and a bit tall, especially with that domed crystal. And the exhibition case back here is pretty useless with the design all over it. The hands are a bit narrow, and it's also somewhere between a diver and a dive style watch, at least by today's standards, as it only has 100 meters of water resistance, but it does have a screw down crown. And to be fair, that does line up with the Panerai it takes its inspiration from. Yet there are a few differences with this one from the other hulls, and the strap is one of them. Where the others are more of a simple classic style strap, this one is kind of like that, but with alligator styling to it. And I think it just kind of looks off for a diver. Not to mention it's pretty stiff, so there's definitely going to be some break-in period here. One positive change from the other hulls is in the lume here. They went from a green to a blue BGW9, and I think it really gives it a different look. And personally, I think the blue is much easier on the eyes. One other change is the placement of the date, as they've moved it away from the 3 to the 6, and they've also given it a pretty nice metallic framing to match the indices. When it comes to the dial design, I kind of have some mixed feelings here. I think it has a very nice symmetrical feel to it, and it's also just a very, very visually interesting dial. And that's not just from the different textures, but also the various layers of depth. And a lot of that is just thanks to the horizontal grooves and the different style of indices here, as the non-loomed Arabics at the 9 and 3 are rather flat compared to the others. However, no matter how many times I look at this dial, those 9 and 3 Arabics just look kind of off and out of place. And as you can see from these macro shots, every scratch, imperfection, and speck of dust are just really hard to ignore. And there's a lot of them here as well, but that's a whole other issue. Not to mention there is a bit of a glare issue with this one as well. It isn't as bad as the Reef Tiger, but it is still an issue. And here I think the glare is mostly coming from the crystal and much less of the dial itself. Now the California edition I looked at also had a bit of a glare issue, but that one also had a textured dial which I think helped compensate for it. And when you do look at the crystal, you can see that there is some AR coating on it, but evidently it's not near enough. So bottom line, I think this is going to be a pass for most people, at least the black dial version. If you are still interested in a hull, then I'd advise you to take a look at one of the ones with the textured dial, as I think that does compensate from the glare from the crystal. But otherwise, that's pretty much all I have for you today. Now, if you have any questions or want more details on something, just ask me below in a comment, as well as just let me know what you think about these watches, as well as maybe this kind of combined shorter format for maybe watches that aren't quite as interesting. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.